So, good morning, and here we are at Bitesize Edge. And today I have the pleasure of talking to a fabulous lady who I have come into contact with on and off over the years, but more recently for a year or so when I was networking. So, welcome Emma Rundle, who is a director of Athena, which is where I met you, the power of networking. And also is the director of Melting Pot. And Melting Pot specialises in copy and content. And you were just telling me before we press record how you've actually been really busy through this lockdown period, which is fabulous. So welcome, Emma.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. It's good to see you. I'd love to talk to you today, or for you to talk to me and share your story. I remember a while back you rocking up at an Athena meeting that you were obviously the director of and sharing your story. And I remember the feedback that came from it was around, one, there was that moment of surprise that you shared something which was very personal and potentially made you quite vulnerable, and there was a shock or a surprise that you opened yourself up in that way. But also there was a massive level of beautiful responses around people feeling privileged that you'd done exactly that and shared it. So would you mind talking to us a little bit about that, Emma?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so to put it into context, I think at the time I was doing a little bit of investigation into the difference between me as a professional woman and me as a kind of mom, wife, whatever. So my background is that I've got two girls, age 7 and nearly 9. And with the first one, I actually, unbeknown to me at the time, developed post-natal depression. Didn't get that looked at. It was only after the birth of my second one that I realised things weren't right. And when I eventually got diagnosed, it was with clinical depression. So what I didn't know was that there's a continuum there and the depression can move along it. I thought that they were all different illnesses. If you had postnatal, then that was what you had, and so on. So it's quite a shock to me, and I lived with it obviously for years. I had treatment. I still take tablets today, but actually I hadn't really ever acknowledged it. And you hear a lot about people saying we must talk more about mental illness, but then no one actually talks about it. They talk about we should talk about it. They don't actually tell a story. So I'd come to the conclusion that I wanted to share my story in an effort just to show people that it can happen to anyone. And obviously I've got this amazing platform, which is my 4 Athena groups that I run. So yes, with the help of a few amazing people, including yourself, I worked out what that would look like, how that would feel. And off I set. So I wrote myself a short sort of 10-minute talk and delivered it. And it's the first time I'd ever told anybody who wasn't either a very close friend or a member of my family. And it was very nerve-wracking, as I'm sure you can imagine, as any kind of, personal talk is, I suppose. But actually, it was the reaction of the people in the room when I told them that was just incredible, really. So I think one of my groups, I got to the end of it, I couldn't even take a sip of water. I was shaking so much, kind of with the adrenaline and so on. Don't know what's going to be said. And the room was deathly quiet when I was talking. I guess it is an unusual thing for someone just to come out with. But one of my groups actually gave me a standing ovation afterwards, which just finished me off, really, kind of like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. But all 4 of the groups, people were incredible. So they were, I think, very moved listening. I could definitely pick out people in the audience who were identifying with the things I was talking about. And actually in most of the groups afterwards, there were some comments. We have a feedback section of the meeting, and there was just an uncanny number of people kind of saying, yep, you know what, I've been there, or even, I've suffered from, domestic abuse, I've suffered from, a whole range of sort of mental experiences, if you like, not necessarily mental illnesses, but mental experiences. And that was just incredible to see that I put myself out there, I guess, the vulnerability was there, and the transaction actually then that went on was that they felt able to do the same, and everybody, and the bonding, between the members at that point was intense.
Incredible. How did you get, so in that environment, because it's an incredibly brave thing to do. And it's really interesting, isn't it? 'Cause if I think about my relationship with the word vulnerability, for a period of time, an extensive period of time, I saw vulnerability as a weakness.
Yeah.
So I was going to be stoic. I was going to be able to deal with everything. I was going to be able to go through some very turbulent times in my life, and no one would see that actually I was
Yeah.
potentially falling apart inside.
Mm.
And then I became really aware of the fact that actually it's a massive strength. It's
Yeah.
a huge strength to be able to go, here I am, because by sharing your story, as you just pointed out there, you give permission to others to be able to put their hand up, their head above water, and kind of go, actually, I've experienced something similar, or I've also had my challenges in the world.
Mm.
So when you did that, when you shared your story with your groups, what did you get back from that experience?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we're not brought up, or our life experiences perhaps actually don't teach us that vulnerability is good. It is. I honestly agree. It's seen as a weakness. I mean, I did 15 to 20 years in corporate world and worked in a very male-dominated environment, in a very male-dominated industry. And you know, that was where I taught myself that you're not vulnerable. You know, you don't have emotional reactions to things. And you know, as a woman in business, I think we're all, you know, I was a young woman in business as well. I mean, what I was doing, you know, I was very young when I was kind of sort of up to middle management levels, and so you felt that you had something to compete with, and it's this kind of this sort of subconscious masculinity of the business world. So I think that for me, I wanted to what I wanted to get out of it was to just finally kill that off in myself. I mean, I've you know, since I've been working for myself, and you know, I work with a lot of ladies, obviously because I run the women's networking. You have a much softer, we all have a much softer approach to business, and so you experience a lot of different things. There's also a huge number of incredibly skilled people in Athena, and who therefore now are part of my life, where you know, they understand how our minds and brains work, and all sorts of different kind of ways of exploring that. So I've been very lucky, and I felt that I'd really, in my head, I'd really come to terms with what had happened, and I'd explored why, and I understood myself now, probably in my mid-40s, better than I've ever done. And I kind of wanted just to do this one last thing. This was the one last thing really that meant that it was out there. And I think the phrase I used in the talk that I gave was about an elephant being in the room, and this elephant wore a kind of peaked cap, so you didn't really know what mood this elephant was in. He would just sit there and kind of, you know, you'd kind of have half an eye thinking, what's going to happen today? And then as a result, now my elephant is actually kind of back to almost like a key ring size, you know, on a chain. I know where he is, and he's very controlled, and I never want him to go away, because I think for me, you know, it's just a constant reminder that it's okay, and that actually I don't really believe that any of us don't suffer in some way, even if it's transient, you know. So yeah, I wanted people to know, because it gave me permission, I think, to be who I am, but also the authenticity, the ability to be authentic. You know, if you've got such a big elephant in your closet or whatever, then you know, the authenticity is always a little bit kind of not quite true. So I think for me it was about that, about genuinely leading these people and showing them that people go through stuff and you just don't always know.
So there's a couple of things you said there that really kind of resonate for me. So the one around authenticity, did you, before I move forward with that, did you at any stage have a concern as to how it would be received?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'd spoken to some really great people, coaches, and people that had helped me get to the point where I was happy to do this. And you know, we'd, you know, been able to have some quite in-depth chats, and they'd allayed a lot of my fears. But yeah, I guess there would be certain people, I guess, that you would think, I'm not sure how they would identify with this. But it didn't really, it was so important to me to do it, I think, that it would never have stopped me. And actually people, honestly, I mean, some of the people who I would see perhaps as I guess it's that who display the more masculine character traits in business. You know, you think perhaps they're a bit less bothered about the emotion and stuff. You know, some of those were people who came up to me afterwards and were the most enthused about what I'd done. So yeah, you can never tell.
Absolutely, isn't it? And the reason I ask that question is because it's also around perception, isn't it? So whatever the dialogue or script we might be playing out, potentially we project that externally, and we look for evidence with the people around us to support that doubt potentially.
Yeah,
so, you talked about that level of honesty and everything else that sits around it, and being kind of almost being true. And I know in my own world, I've gone through times when, and this will, you might kind of go, I know you have, Pip, when I've been really good at holding everything here, and I've had my own story kicking off behind, truly knowing, this is one of the things I actively encourage and coach people to do in my environment, but was I truly doing that myself? And once you put yourself in that position of opening up and saying, here I am, this is me, this is my story, this is my life, there's a sense of freedom, I think. And also there's that moment of kind of letting go and going, do you know what, some of you will buy into this and get it, some of you will make judgments, and so be it, that's your world. But for me to be true to me and therefore be true with you, I want to share my story.
Exactly that. And I just genuinely believe, as I said earlier, that, you know, we talking about mental health now. That's become, you know, the right thing to do. But I still don't genuinely believe that I hear from many everyday people about their story. And that's why I wanted to do it. And what's been really powerful, actually, is that I don't believe I've changed. I would be very surprised if I have, as a result of telling those people. So what those people will have seen was, you know, Emma, the regional director, running an Athena meeting, Emma coming in and giving this, you know, quite surprising talk, and then Emma coming back again the next month and running Athena again. So there's no, and no one has treated me differently, which I think is the more lasting fact, and the thing that's really the most important. You know, the last thing I wanted was sympathy, but I didn't get that. I got huge amounts of support, and that's different to sympathy. You know, it was very constructive, and it was very much about acceptance, I guess, which is the real key, I think, to it. And just if we do all accept that this doesn't mean you're in a box, or it doesn't mean you have to be given a label, actually that's how people will be able to function, I think, more.
Totally. And one of the other things you said that really made me roar internally was you were talking about emotion in the corporate world. I've recently sold a business, and that's gone back into the corporate arena to a part of my role. And I recently got told third hand that a client had said, well, if I talk to Pip about this, I know that she'll come back with an emotional response. And the guy I was talking to, and it's a very large corporate global organization, and this was being fed back to me as a potential negative, and I just fed back and said, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because what is perceived as an emotional response for me is perceived as passion.
Exactly. And I think that we not only do we experience sort of that kind of, it's the labeling. It's not just the behavior, it's the labeling. So a woman and a man can display exactly the same emotion, but it's given a different title. And I've seen a few posts about this recently, actually, around, you know, and there's certainly around, I think it was it Serena Williams or somebody who was criticised for being like over emotional, basically, or hormonal practically. And actually all she did was you know, almost probably nothing compared to good old John McEnroe back in the day, you know. So actually we just see it as a different reaction entirely, or it gets labelled as a different reaction entirely. And I think that goes back again to that sort of subliminal prejudice that we have, and also the belief potentially actually that you can't have a soft side, or you can't display a soft side and be a successful leader or a successful business person. And even given what's going on in the world these days, where actually, you know, we do all need to be a bit more human. You know, look at the fact that, you know, for the last 4 months we've all had to do our work and show up as professionals, potentially with kids hanging off of each shoulder. You know, I've certainly had a few moments where I've been was peeling an avocado one day or peeling a mango, sorry, and doing some presentation on Zoom. But actually people are, that is breaking down those barriers. Ultimately, we're all human. We all have emotions. We all have things that we are in control of and things that we are not in control of. And the sooner we get over ourselves and don't take ourselves so seriously, just because we're in an office, it's really, everybody goes home at the end of the day, and most people are mum or dad or their husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever they are. Ultimately, we've all got we're humans. And I think if we can't learn that now, given what's been going on, then we're gonna struggle really to accept.
I like that whole get over yourself. It's so important, isn't it?
Really
so
important. There's no need
we
to
create it though, don't we? We create that whole manifestation, and you kind of go, I've got no idea what's happening in someone else's mind, but I've absolutely created what I believe it to be.
Absolutely.
It completely influences the way I choose to behave.
Yeah, and in some ways our brains are too clever. They'll take two, really disparate bits of information and try and link them. We fill that vacuum, don't we? So we make something up. I think that's, I know that in some of the small amounts of NLP I've done with you, you can see how just by trying to change that, you can completely change your attitude. Yeah,
completely. So talked a moment ago about obviously this unusual situation we're in right now. What are we in? Month four?
Do you know what? I thought the other day it was a week ago. It was February. I've lost the plot completely. Yeah. I think month 4 though.
Can I ask you, Emma? Has this whole situation, this lockdown situation, has it created any other mental health challenges for you, or has it actually been quite a comforting kind of environment? Does that make sense?
It does actually, because often if you are anxious, which obviously is a massive aspect of depression, you can actually be, and I at one point, so some of my triggers at one point would have meant I just wanted everybody to be within reach and didn't want anyone to really go anywhere or or be on my own or whatever. In actual fact, I'm really pleased to say that it hasn't given me any real challenges. It's obviously the sort of thing that when you have suffered, you never know if it could come back. So anything big like this is always a concern in terms of, okay, I just need to be aware that I'm in touch with my feelings, and I'm not sort of doing anything that means I'm turning away from anything. So it's about being quite mindful and quite focused. And in actual fact, what I did start doing for a couple of different reasons right at the beginning of this was writing something called the 6-minute diary, which is it is literally what it says it is: 3 minutes in the morning, 3 minutes in the evening. I'm not very good at doing the journaling thing. I don't find the time, obviously, with the kids being quite young. But this one has really worked for me. And actually, I was looking back through it the other day and thinking, goodness, this is fascinating to see, because I went into the rabbit in headlights, like I think most organised or women who need to be organised because you've got young kids and you're running a business. At the end of the day, you're not used to the rug being taken out from under you. You're used to being in control, making decisions and so on. So there was definitely a period of rabbit in headlights, and because I write for a living, that kind of really affected my ability to put pen to paper or whatever. So it was an interesting, and it's definitely been a roller coaster, but not in a mental health way. I think that feels for me, and I think a lot of what I've done has really protected that. It's almost put me in a place now where, as I say, I've got my elephant in a little box, and fully respectful of that elephant, but I know where it is and where I believe it's going to stay. So I think it's but then again, I totally get that this sort of situation can really play to people's anxieties or triggers, and definitely experienced behaviours that show that people are really feeling quite unhappy.
So for someone who's gone through quite an extensive journey when it comes to your mental health, and seemingly, from what you said there, you've got it into a place where, and I love that, you've got respect for it. Yeah, you absolutely respect, and I think that is so important, isn't it? Because it's part of who you are and part of who you've been. And actually, you've got respect for it, and you know where it is. What would be What would be your advice to anyone listening to this who maybe has struggled through this time of the pandemic, or actually outside of the time of the pandemic, with omitting or being true to themselves around how their mental wellness might be? What would be your advice?
So I think my biggest learning point actually was the fact that the doctor, when I finally went to see them, explained that this was a manifestation of untreated postnatal depression. So again, I didn't realise that there was this continuum and you can move along it. And so actually that made me quite nervous, I suppose, because I think, naively you tend to think, well, if I've got postnatal depression, then that goes in that little box there and that's finished by the time the kids get older. But of course it's not, and it can become a lot worse, as mine did. My advice would be to bear that in mind, and to bear in mind that it isn't just going to go away. And what tends to happen, as would happen with me, is that the dips get deeper and they last for longer. So it's harder to pull yourself back up out of that. And I was very resistant to medication, really didn't want to, I think in my mind, end up like a zombie. Well, that's not, these days that is just not what happens. I'm on a relatively mild drug, which, doctors are quite happy for people to be on for most of their lives. It's not, it's not my behaviour altering. It just helps my brain, I guess, to do what it needs to do. But one of the other things is, if you are struggling, my advice would just be to look at as much as you can. Look at your diet, look at your lifestyle, look at what truly makes you happy. And it's very hard to get in touch with that at first, but in terms of diet, one of the biggest things is if we all eat sort of a lot of low fat stuff, the fat molecules that we need in our brain to help our brain to move, the chemicals around are just not present. So I've been, on a huge journey, as I say, and I've been very lucky to know lots of people who are very knowledgeable in these areas. And just by constantly reviewing and looking at me and who I am inside and outside, what I'm eating, what I'm doing, exercise, the whole thing is true. All of it is true. And when you're low, it's the hardest thing to do any of that, because clearly your motivation's done a bunk and you don't really want to kind of get on with anything. Go and get advice, and don't feel that that's going to define you, that that's it. Oh my God, that's it. I've got, mental illness. That's not how it is. It's the first step is going and getting it acknowledged. I think that's, it's all I can really say is don't be scared of it. Don't be scared of it. Just embrace it and use it as a stepping stone to getting better.
What a great advice. So it's true though, isn't it? If you think about what's the most important to someone who is sailing, they know where they need to go, but actually they've got to work out where they are in the first place.
Yeah, so, and that is the hardest thing. Yeah. And don't pressure yourself to get the answer. You don't need to find the answer. You need to find the road to get to be on, which will take you there, I think.
Thank you, Emma. That's really helpful. So on that final note, am I right in thinking you're out on a bike frequently?
I am, and it's been lovely during lockdown because there's not been any traffic. So I'm normally a mountain biker. I've got a road bike at the moment because that's been obviously easier to do when the parks were closed and stuff. But yeah, a bit of exercise, a bit of fresh air, nothing like it.
Absolutely. Do you swim?
I don't actually. No, not really. I think I've spent too much time sweating in swimming pools watching the kids do their lessons. It's put me off a bit.
I was going to actively encourage you to start doing triathlons because they're amazing.
Yes, you've done some, haven't you? I'm in awe of people that do big sort of athletic things.
They do little ones though, Emma. They do little ones. It just consider
maybe that's something for next year.
Absolutely. So Emma, thank you so much. I would love to come back and speak to you again about your work and about Athena. But for now, for anyone wanting to get hold of you, wanting to reach you, maybe to have a conversation with you, if you're open to that around
absolutely
mental wellness and so on, how best can they find you?
So email is probably the easiest. So I'm Emma at meltingpotcreations.co.uk. That's my business email. So yeah, and absolutely happy. I'm on LinkedIn. If you search copywriting by Emma, then I'm on LinkedIn. I'd be more than happy to connect with people. And I've always got time to talk to people about any of their challenges, really.
Thank you, Emma, so much. So you can find us on Spotify, you can find us on iTunes and anywhere else that you go to get your podcasts. So until next time, thank you very much for listening and speak to you all soon.